The driveway crunched under the tires as we pulled up to Lyle's estate. It was the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread: rolling hills, white gravel paths, a porch wider than our apartment. I parked at the far end of the circular loop, away from the cluster of luxury sedans. Maybe it was subconscious, or maybe I just didn't want my beat-up truck anywhere near Lyle's Tesla. My name is Greg. I'm 52, live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and work maintenance at a local high school. Not glamorous, but I've always been decent with my hands. That night, though, none of that mattered. My wife, Cheryl, barely said a word during the drive. Her eyes flicked to her phone every 30 seconds, thumbs flying over the screen. She didn't look up when I asked if her dress was warm enough for the breeze. "I'm fine," she muttered, the kind of clipped response that didn't leave room for follow-up. Inside, the house was buzzing with the kind of practiced laughter that only money could produce. I recognized a few faces: her cousin Fiona, Lyle's business partner from Cleveland, maybe one or two of the neighbors from the lake house. I offered a few polite nods and made my way to the dining room, where they'd set a long, glossy table with way too many forks. Dinner started like these things always do. Toasts, wine, awkward jokes from uncles. I sat between Cheryl and one of Lyle's golfing buddies, a guy with teeth too white to be real. I tried not to shrink into my chair. Eventually someone asked about my motorbike project, and I lit up a little. It had been a few months of sweat and spare parts, and I'd just about gotten the old Honda running again. "I rebuilt the carburetor from scratch," I said, more animated than I meant to be. "Still need some clutch work, but Oh please," Cheryl cut in, loud enough to slice the air. "You rebuilt it by watching a YouTube video and swearing at it for 2 months. A few people laughed. That awful, uncomfortable kind of laugh, a half nervous, half entertained. Someone coughed into their napkin. Lal sipped his wine like he hadn't heard a thing. I went still. My mouth opened, then shut. I looked at her, waiting for a smile, a wink, some signal that she was just teasing. There wasn't one. She was already back on her phone, scrolling with a smirk on her lips like the conversation never mattered. No one said anything else to me for the rest of the meal. As the steak was cleared and dessert came out, I just sat there, turning over her words. It wasn't just a joke. It was a performance. A statement, right in front of her family, that I was a fool she could roll her eyes at. And no one, not her cousin, not her brother, not even Lyle, challenged it. I didn't speak for the rest of the night. I didn't need to. The message had been received, loud and clear. We didn't talk on the way home. Cheryl kept her face turned toward the window, her screen lighting up every few seconds with a buzz I tried to ignore. Somewhere around Strasbourg, she let out a little laugh. Not a big one, just a breathy, amused exhale, like whatever meme or message she was reading had brightened her whole night. She didn't look at me once. I had both hands on the wheel, staring down the dark country road like it was something I could conquer if I just drove steady enough. But my mind wasn't on the pavement. I was still sitting at that dinner table, still hearing the laughter, still feeling the way my chest went tight when her voice cut through my story like I didn't even belong at that table. Like I wasn't a real person, just some small-town handyman she could keep around for appearances. I used to think it was just stress, or moods, or her way of handling things. That if I gave it time, if I worked a little harder, said the right thing, showed up with flowers once in a while, it would turn around. But tonight? That was something else. Tonight wasn't a bad mood. It was her truth. When we pulled into the driveway, she got out first, already scrolling again, already halfway up the steps before I'd even killed the engine. She didn't wait for me. She didn't say goodnight. Inside, she turned the hallway light on and walked straight into the kitchen like everything was fine. I heard the fridge door open, the hum of the water dispenser, then the soft click of her bedroom door shutting behind her. She hadn't slept in our bed for a few months. Not since July, when she said my snoring kept her up and it'd be easier this way. I didn't argue. That night, I lay in our empty bed staring at the ceiling, listening through the thin wall as she laughed again. A softer laugh this time. Not the kind you share with someone. The kind you give your phone when you forget there's someone else in the house. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt awake. The silence between us didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like permission. Like something had finally clicked into place. I wasn't angry. I was just done pretending. I decided to try something different. No more chasing her. No more checking in to see if she was okay when she got quiet. No more asking what was wrong and getting a shrug in return. I stopped reaching out entirely. Monday morning came and went. I made coffee. She walked in, poured hers without a word, and left her cup half full on the counter like always. I didn't follow her. By Tuesday, I'd stopped trying to think of ways to make her laugh. I used to send her pictures of dogs in overalls, dumb stuff I knew she used to like. I deleted the drafts. On Wednesday, I didn't ask where she was going when she put on lipstick and heels at 6:45 p.m. I just nodded from my seat on the porch and kept sanding the little side table I'd been working on. She seemed lighter. Not happy, exactly, but relaxed. Like she could finally breathe now that I wasn't hovering. That's what gutted me the most. She didn't notice anything had changed. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Either way, she didn't ask. Thursday, I found an old box of photos in the attic. Back when we used to go places together, Smoky Mountains, a day trip to Hershey Park, even just bowling with friends. I looked at those old shots of her with her arms around my waist, her head tilted back in a real laugh, and it hit me. She had checked out a long time ago. She hadn't just drifted. She had let go, and I'd been the only one trying to hold on. Friday night, I stood at the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, and caught my reflection doing something unfamiliar, smiling. Not because I was happy, but because the pretending was over. That silent week was louder than any fight we'd ever had. By Saturday, I realized I'd stopped waiting for her to come around. Stopped looking for signs of affection. Stopped trying to prove I was still worth something in her eyes. Because I saw it now. Her interest in me had always been thin. A performance when others were around, politeness when it suited her. But real connection? Real care? That had vanished a long time ago, maybe even before I noticed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was clear. The man she treated like background noise had finally gone quiet. Not to sulk, not to punish, but because there was nothing left to say. Sunday morning, I got up early, before Cheryl was awake, and went out to the garage. The old boat had been sitting there for years, dusty, half-stripped, one tire sagging from disuse. I pulled off the tarp and just stood there a minute, looking at it like I was seeing it for the first time. I didn't plan anything that day. I just started, pulled out the rusted screws, replaced the brittle wiring, dug through my old tool drawers, and found things I hadn't touched in years. The hours passed without me noticing. I came inside after dark, arms sore, hands filthy, and realized I hadn't thought about her once. The next day at work, I stayed late. Not out of obligation, but because I had an idea I wanted to pitch about a safer stairwell design near the gym. It wasn't part of my job, but I'd drawn it up anyway. The assistant principal asked if I'd considered a facilities manager certification. I hadn't, but I started reading about it that night. By midweek, I'd rejoined the hiking group I used to go out with every couple of weekends before things at home got complicated. I didn't tell Cheryl. I just went. Woke up early, drove out to Pinnacle Overlook, and spent the morning sweating through switchbacks with a group of guys who didn't care where I worked or what kind of car I drove. They asked about the trail. I asked about their boots. It felt good. Honest. At home, I stopped asking where she was going. I stopped texting when she stayed out late. When she mentioned dinner plans she'd made without including me, I nodded and went back to reading. That's when she started to notice. Thursday night, she walked into the room and gave me a once-over. I was in jeans that actually fit and a clean flannel I hadn't worn in months. "Who are you dressing up for these days?" she asked, not smiling. I didn't look up. Just felt like wearing something clean. She stood there another second, waiting, but I didn't offer anything more. That's how it went for a while. She'd toss little jabs. "Someone's suddenly busy," or "Are you working overtime for the glory now?" But I didn't bite. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I just didn't care what she thought. At work, people started noticing. I cracked more jokes, made better eye contact, even got invited out for a beer after a Friday shift, something that hadn't happened in years. I went, and when I got home, Cheryl asked where I'd been, not with anger, but with something like curiosity. I had plans, I said simply, hanging up my coat. She didn't know what to do with that. The more I reclaimed my time, my space, my voice, the more she seemed to shift from indifferent to unsettled. And the more she pushed, the calmer I became. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't building my worth around her approval. I was building it around myself. Saturday morning, I packed my old tackle box and dug my fishing rod out of the hall closet. It still had the same cracked grip from the last time I'd gone. Must have been 5, 6 years ago, back when Kevin and I used to head out to Lake Marburg before dawn and just sit in the quiet, letting the water do most of the talking. I hadn't even told him I was coming this time. I just called the day before and said, "You still got room on that boat?" And he said, "For you?" Always. I was in the garage loading gear into the back of the truck when I heard her heels click up behind me. "Fishing?" she asked, leaning in the doorway with her arms crossed. "Yeah. Since when do you go anywhere?" Her tone was light, but there was something behind it. Not curiosity, something sharper. "Since now," I said, looping the strap of the cooler into the back seat. She tilted her head. "I was going to make dinner tonight. Thought maybe we could eat together for once." I stopped, one hand still on the cooler lid. She hadn't made a meal for us, on purpose, in over a year. And now, suddenly, the woman who barely spoke to me wanted to share a roast? I turned toward her. "That's nice," I said, "but I already have plans." She straightened. "You could reschedule. It's not like this trip is urgent." I shook my head. "Not this time." Something flickered in her eyes, an instinct, maybe, to press harder. But I think she saw it then. The part of me that used to bend was gone. "I'm leaving now," I said quietly, grabbing my jacket off the hook. She didn't move from the doorway, just stood there watching, like she was trying to figure out what had changed. Have fun, she said finally, voice stiff. I will. And I meant it. I backed out of the driveway without glancing up at the window. As I hit the highway, windows down and the cold air slicing through the truck, I felt something shift in my chest. Not defiance. Not spite. Relief. It wasn't just a fishing trip. It was a line drawn in the sand. For the first time in a long time, I had chosen myself. And I hadn't asked for permission. The change wasn't loud. It crept in like a draft you don't notice at first, small, easy to ignore, until suddenly you realize you're cold. A week after the fishing trip, she brought home takeout from that Thai place I liked. She'd never remembered my order before, but this time she set the container down right in front of me and said, extra spicy, right? I looked at the box, then up at her. Thanks, I said. She hovered by the counter, waiting for something more. When I didn't say it, she smiled thinly and walked off. That was the first sign. Then came the compliments, odd, out-of-place little observations she hadn't made in years. You've been looking more rested lately, she said one morning as I left for work. That shirt fits you better now. Another day, as I walked through the hall. Each one delivered with a softness I didn't recognize. Not genuine warmth, more like strategic politeness. She started texting me in the middle of the day. Just casual things at first. A photo of the neighbor's dog chasing a squirrel. A meme she thought was funny. Then came a text that read, we should plan a weekend away. Just the two of us. It's been too long. I stared at the message for a minute before locking my phone and setting it back on the workbench. At home, she asked about my schedule more often. She asked if I'd be home for dinner. She offered to wash my laundry instead of just dumping it on the bed like before. None of it felt like her. Because it wasn't. It was her realizing I wasn't orbiting her anymore. She wasn't trying to reconnect. She was trying to recapture. That's when it hit me. This wasn't affection, it was strategy. I wasn't a person she wanted to be close to again. I was a pattern she couldn't recognize anymore. The man who used to ask if she needed anything, who used to hover and guess at her moods and chase her approval, he'd gone quiet. And she didn't like that. Because if I wasn't reacting to her, then she wasn't in control. I played along. I thanked her when she cooked. I responded politely to her texts. I even agreed when she suggested a walk around the neighborhood. But inside, I was gone. The dynamic had flipped, and she felt it. For years, I was the one trying to earn her attention. Now she was the one trying to reestablish hers over me. But it was too late. I didn't need to fight anymore. Because once you stop chasing someone, you start seeing them clearly. And what I saw now was a woman grasping for power she no longer had. It was another family gathering, same estate, same white tablecloth set up under Lyle's pergola, same crowd of carefully styled relatives sipping wine like it was their job. Only this time, I wasn't walking in with my head down. I parked where I pleased. Got out in jeans and a dark button-up. Not flashy, just clean and sharp enough that I didn't feel like a background extra. Cheryl was already there, of course. I saw her talking to Fiona by the outdoor bar, laughing that airy, practiced laugh she always saved for an audience. She looked up and spotted me as I approached, and something about her expression tightened. I didn't wave, just gave a small nod and kept walking. Lyle's cousin Brent, the one with the backyard vineyard and permanent golf tan, clapped me on the shoulder when I got close to the food table. Greg, right? Heard about that new position at the school. You're the facilities coordinator now. Yeah, I said. Just got promoted last month. Congrats, man. I told Lyle they should have had you in charge of that HVAC project ages ago. I blinked. That was the first time anyone in this family had called what I do a position instead of a favor or hobby. Then Fiona chimed in. Cheryl said you're restoring an old boat? That true. I nodded. Almost got it ready for the water. Needs new seals and some wiring, but it's close. You always did have a talent for that stuff, she said. And for once, it didn't sound patronizing. Just honest. It felt weird, being seen. Not like a project. Not like someone barely tolerated. But like a person who had value. Then Cheryl joined us. She looked me up and down, a smile playing on her lips, except it didn't reach her eyes. You've been busy, she said. New job, new hobbies. What's next, a motorcycle gang? A few people chuckled. That old mocking tone was back, disguised as humor. She was trying to reset the dynamic, bring the focus back to her turf. I sipped my drink, then looked her square in the eye. The difference is, I said, calm and steady. I stopped listening to people who never believed in me. It landed like a dropped plate. Lyle blinked. Fiona raised her eyebrows. Brent made a low sound like he'd just witnessed a sports upset. Cheryl's mouth opened, then shut again. No comeback. No laugh. Just silence. I turned and walked away before anyone could say a word. Found a chair near the edge of the lawn and sat down, watching the breeze rustle through the trees. I didn't need applause. I didn't need to explain. That moment wasn't about winning. It wasn't about payback. It was about being seen, and choosing not to shrink. For the first time at one of these gatherings, I wasn't invisible, and I wasn't beneath anyone. Not anymore. It happened the next evening. I was fixing a loose latch on the back gate when she came outside, holding 2 mugs of coffee like this was something we did now. Talk in the yard, like a normal couple. She handed me one without asking if I wanted it. I was thinking, she said, settling onto the porch steps. Maybe we should go out this weekend. Dinner somewhere nice. Just the 2 of us. I didn't look at her. I tapped the hinge with the back of the screwdriver, checking the tension. We don't really do dinners, I said. We could, she replied. It'd be nice. I took a slow sip of the coffee. It was too sweet, the way she used to like it. She still didn't know I drank it black. When I finally sat beside her, I could feel her eyes on me, watching for any softening. Any sign I was still in her orbit. I think we should work on things, she said. We've both said and done stuff. But I'm willing to meet in the middle. That word, willing, landed with a dull thud. Like she was offering me some sort of treaty. A performance of compromise. But it wasn't compromise. It was damage control. There was a time when a moment like this would have reeled me in. Back when I thought her coldness was just a wall I could climb. But now I saw it plain. This wasn't warmth. It was panic. She wasn't missing me. She was missing the version of me who tiptoed around her moods and filled the silence with effort. I set the mug down on the step. There's nothing to work on. Her head turned sharply. What? I don't think we're in a relationship. I think we're just in the same house. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. You don't love me. Not really. You love the version of me who didn't notice. The one who stayed quiet. That's not fair, she said quickly. You're twisting everything. No, I said, finally turning to look at her. I'm just not lying to myself anymore. Her jaw tightened. So that's it. You're giving up. I gave everything I had, I said. You just never noticed until I stopped. There was a beat of silence. Then she stood up, her face hardening. You're just walking away? I already have, I said, standing too. You just didn't see it. I walked inside without slamming the door, without raising my voice. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't need to. That night, I didn't sleep in the bedroom. I didn't even sit in the living room. I took my keys, got in the truck, and drove. No destination, just distance. And with every mile, I felt it more. Not regret, not fear, but relief. Because leaving without chaos wasn't weakness. It was strength. The next morning was quiet. Too quiet, almost like the house was trying to pretend nothing had happened. I came in through the side door just before 7, same way I always did. Set my keys down, took off my boots, walked into the kitchen like it was any other day. Cheryl was at the stove, flipping pancakes. She hadn't made breakfast in years. Coffee's fresh, she said without turning around. I didn't know what time you'd be back. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, watching her move around the kitchen like she was performing the role of a wife she'd never really wanted to play. There was syrup on the table, butter softening in a small dish, even plates already set for 2. She looked over her shoulder and smiled. It wasn't real. It was reflex. Survival. So, about last night, she started. I didn't let her finish. I'm not staying, I said. The spatula in her hand froze mid-turn. Not just for the day, I added. I'm leaving. She turned to face me fully now, crossing her arms tight against her chest. You're serious? Yeah, I said. I've been serious for a while. You just didn't notice. She looked like she wanted to argue, maybe shout, maybe cry. But instead she just leaned against the counter and asked, So what now? You just walk away? No. I've already been walking, I said, calm. This is just the last step. I walked past her to the bedroom, packed a small bag, just clothes, some tools, my toothbrush. Left the rest. I didn't need much. On the kitchen counter, I left a single note. Don't worry. I'm not angry. Just done. When I stepped outside, the morning sun had just started warming the street. Birds were chirping. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler clicked on. I got in the truck and sat for a second with the engine running, hands steady on the wheel. There was no big scene, no slammed doors, no accusations shouted through tears. Just a man leaving quietly, not because he hated what he was walking away from, but because he finally respected himself enough to stop waiting for someone else to. And with that, I drove away, lighter than I had felt in years.